really look forward to jumping into this with you. Make sure that you dive all the way into it. You're going to get a lot out of it. Soak it up. I look forward to this experience with you. There's the whole concept of the separation of church and state. Yet at the same time, getting into the spiritual dimension of, of human beings and understand what they're doing in life to try to get by and what their experience is. It's like, where do you draw lines? And did you find yourself having to find a place to say, okay, I got to draw a line here, to separate these two things?
I think there were people who, because of my background, thought that if I got elected to public office, that I would try to replace the Capitol dome with a steeple, that I would push for legislation that everyone would be required to go to Wednesday night Bible study. And that was never the agenda.
Right.
I didn't feel like that I was trying to bring my faith and impose it upon other people by government edict. In fact, I would find that repulsive. Mm-hmm. But it was also that my faith help shape my view toward how do we help somebody who is poor? What is my biblical responsibility? And frankly, there was never a time that I could find that a biblical conviction was in conflict with or was somehow hurtful to the best interest of the people that I was elected to serve. If it's an education issue, do we want education to be equally accessible to everybody, whether they're black or white, rich or poor? Mm-hmm. I think most of us would say, well, yeah. Well, where did I come to get that view that every person has worth and value? That's what made me pro-life. Mm-hmm. How can I say that the child with Down syndrome isn't worth as much as the captain of the football team? Right. How could I ever come to that conclusion? Only if I decided that some people are worth more than others. If I believe there's a God, and God made the kid with Down syndrome, and he made the captain of the football team, he made them with equal love and worth and intrinsic value. One is not more valuable than the other. How can I say that we should take the life of this unborn child, regardless of why I justify it, because isn't that child equally important as the one whose parents put this picture of the sonogram on the refrigerator and make everybody look at it everywhere they go? Mm-hmm. What's different? Both children in the womb have equal value and worth. And there's not a distinction in God's mind between this one is worth something, this one, it's expendable, it's disposable. When we ever get to the place where we think another human being is disposable and expendable, we've really shaken our fist in God's face and said, you really made a mistake on this one. I don't want to stand before him and try to convince him of that.
With your time in public office and serving as governor, for all the years that you did, and especially you were a Republican governor, and which was a rarity in Arkansas.
It right? Sure was, yeah.
And did people try to use the fact that you had such a foundation in your faith against you, to try to weaken your political position in the state?
There were times when people would maybe say, well, you're a Christian. How could you be so difficult on this issue? Now, it's interesting because the same people who thought that I should never be politically tough were also the same ones who didn't think I should ever be a Christian in public office. So there's the great irony.
Right.
And it's a double-edged sword. I would say this. If a person plays NFL football, mm-hmm. and that person happens to be a believer, is he going to hit the opposing lineman any less hard? No, because his job is to knock that guy on his backside right. every time the ball is snapped. His job is not to go up and touch him and say, tag, you're it. It's to tackle him and put him on the ground. He may be a believer, but this is a tough job. It's a sport in which there's full contact. Mm-hmm. I try to remind people that if you're going to get into the realm of politics, it is a full contact sport. Right. You need to play with integrity and honor and play fairly. But if you're not willing to play hard enough to win, I don't care if you're a Christian or not. That's not the game for you. Do something else. And again, I don't know of a better analogy than saying football is a tough sport. Right. If you play it and you're a Christian, You still tackle people, you still block them, you hit them, and you hit them hard. You try to knock the ball out of their hands and make them fumble. You try to intercept a pass that was not intended for you.
Right.
But that's the rules of the gridiron.
Right.
And when you're playing in the realm of politics, you're trying to get things passed. You're trying to change the culture that you're serving. And if you're not willing to play hard and be tough about it, then I wouldn't advise getting in it. If you can't stand to see the sight of your own blood, don't run for anything.
Good advice. What advice would you have for voters as far as what they should be looking for in their leaders that they want to vote for?
I would say the number one thing I wish people would look for in their candidates is authenticity. Mm-hmm. You know, everybody thinks I would say, oh, elect people who are Christian. Mm-hmm. Well, I know a lot of people who pretend to be Christians, but they're biggest phonies I've ever met. Right. I always worry when the first thing somebody says is, I just want you to know I'd love to enter this business deal with you, and I'm a Christian. Never want to get in those, because I've learned the hard way that that's usually a recipe for disaster. People are using faith as an entree to try to get you to trust them, not because they're people of integrity, but because they're using that as a cover for the fact that they are not. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying if a person has a declaration of faith, you should avoid them. But I'd rather have somebody who honestly says, I'm not a Christian, but I'd like to be your senator, than somebody who says, oh, I just love God. I'm going to show up at church the 4 weeks before the election. You won't see me for another 4 years, but this month I'll be there because it's right before voting time. I can't stand that.
And we've seen it, haven't we?
Oh, we see it all the time. I hate the duplicity. Mm-hmm. I hate that entire phoniness that causes people to stumble and to say, well, if that's Christianity, I don't want any part of it. So I'd rather a person just say, hey, I'm an atheist. Mm-hmm. Okay, at least I know where you stand.
Right.
And that part of your life I totally don't agree with, but at least you're honest about it. An honest atheist is less a threat to the kingdom of God than is a dishonest Christian, a person who professes it but has no intention of actually living it.
Mm. So much of this in the end, I think, emerges in inspiration. You know, there is a history. There's the evidence of that history, but it translates into this inspiration in life and for life. Our forefathers in this country, to me, I think, our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, is maybe the greatest intellectual feat in human history. I find inspiration there. What do you find as far as inspiration in the founding of this country and how it's emerged over time, and how does that relate to faith?
I personally don't think that it's possible to explain America apart from faith and God's direct intervention. His answer to the prayers of people who came here to escape from the galloping terror of tyranny in order to establish real freedom for their families and their future. They wanted their families to be able to believe out of their convictions without the government giving them restrictions and limitations on what they could believe and how that could be manifest. And we forget that our history as a nation is first and foremost a history in that people were in a quest for religious liberty. And the very foundation of our system is based on that. The First Amendment to the Constitution begins with religious liberty. Because the founders understood that if the government could limit what you could believe, then the government could limit what you could say. They could limit with whom you associated. They could limit what criticism you could have of the government. They could limit everything. It has to start with that sense of faith and perspective. So I can't think of anything more critical than recognizing as we step back that this country had a unique foundation. I mean, I think about it this way. When we broke from the mother country and said to King George, we're done with you, we challenged the greatest standing army on the globe at the time. His army was better equipped, they were better trained, they were better manned, and they were even better dressed. I mean, everything about the British Army was vastly superior to ours. We had a bunch of farmers and merchants who were grabbing the muskets off the mantle, muskets that were better designed for varmint hunting than fighting a war. Our Navy was a couple of rowboats. I mean, we had no business saying we're going to be an independent nation. That was absurd. How did we win? I think you can only say by the grace of God.
Yeah.
There's no other explanation for this.
It was miraculous.
I truly believe it was a miracle.
Yeah. Well, I will say that, number one, you've been a great inspiration to me and to many that I know, and
Thank you.
You've contributed greatly to this project, so I thank you for your time, and I wish you Godspeed in all your endeavors.
Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate that.
That's it for this particular interview. Thanks for joining me. Really excited to take this ongoing journey with you as we keep bringing more content. If you haven't already, you really should subscribe to this channel. There's a lot of phenomenal content coming down the road into the future that you'll want to know about. Leave a comment down here. I think people would love to hear from you, and then you can hear from them too. If you liked it, go ahead and give a like. It only takes half a second, and share this with people that you care about. The world needs more light in it right now. So thanks for being with me. Hope to connect with you again soon.